Hello everyone, this is Delster. Welcome to another video, and in today's video I will be doing the 4th episode of Dark Side of the Ring Season 1. I only need this episode and 2 more episodes to finish Season 1 and go into Season 2. I want to also call myself out because I did say in the Randy and Elizabeth video that Scott Hall had an episode, but it turns out that he does not have one. I could have sworn he had one for the first season, but it's not there. I must have got it confused with another documentary of him somewhere that I watched. I can't remember which one. Maybe it was the 30 on 30 or something. I do apologize if I led anyone thinking that Scott Hall had an episode for Dark Side of the Ring, as he does not have one. Anyway, in this episode, it talks about the lives of the Von Erich family, and just to put out a trigger warning, that this episode focuses on mental illness and the majority of the Von Erich brothers taking on their own lives. So if you don't want to hear about suicide or you get scared of this topic, this video might not be for you. I haven't watched this episode in years since it came out, and I have a lot to say about this family. Recently, they came out with a movie starring Zac Efron and Jeremy Allen White called The Iron Claw, which is a signature move that the Von Erichs would use for wrestling. It is missing one of the brothers, Chris Von Erich, though, but in this episode review, I will talk about all the brothers. Also, another warning, this video will probably be long. The movie was really good, and I did a movie review about the movie. If you would like to check it out, it's on my video library. I will explain at the end of how I found out about the Von Erich brothers, because it's a long one too. I will summarize and try to explain the history of the Von Erichs as much as I can. The Von Erichs were a popular family of wrestlers in the 80s and wrestled a lot in Texas. Fritz Von Erich's real name was Jack Barton Atkinson. He was a huge wrestling star in the 50s and 60s, as he was a huge heel. Fritz used a Nazi gimmick, and the crowd hated him for it. This is the only time I will say the word since it goes against YouTube rules. Kevin Von Erich said that watching his father wrestling was tormenting. He probably didn't like seeing his dad get beat up. Fritz was the one who invented the Iron Claw, where one hand squeezes the temples of the other person or opponent. After getting his own promotion called World Class Championship Wrestling, WCCW, Fritz became a promoter and had some memorable stars such as his sons, Bruiser Brody, Abdullah the Butcher, Rick Rude, Chris Adams, and the Fabulous Freebirds. His sons were so influenced by their dad that they wanted to be wrestlers too, but they would soon become much more than that. WCCW became number 1 on the Sunday morning ratings in the 80s. The Von Erich brothers would become heartthrobs and even had their own comic series. The Von Erich brothers were also in commercials, one of them being Pizza Inn, and were classified as heroes in the state of Texas. Behind the ring, the Von Erich family were very close, as they were always hunting and fishing together. Kevin was the oldest brother, but before he was born, he had an older brother who died at the age of 6. His name was Jack Jr., and he died by electrocution followed by drowning in a puddle. They eventually got back on their feet, as the Von Erichs would make a memorable mark in the wrestling business, good and bad. Kerry, the 4th brother, was the biggest star of all the Von Erichs, and was the only one who was in the WWF, now WWE, during the early 90s. Kevin, who is the 2nd oldest brother, since Jack Jr. died so young, was considered a great athlete with a good physique. Mike and Chris, the youngest of Fritz's sons, weren't very muscular like Kevin, Kerry, and David, as they were very thin, but put in a lot of effort. When Jack Jr. died, Kevin was 3 years old and said that Fritz was never the same after that day. His father hit the car window after hearing that Jack Jr. was gone. Kevin saw his parents crying and that his dad, Fritz, looked like he wanted to die himself. Sadly, that wasn't the only brother who would die too soon of the Von Erich family. David, being the 3rd oldest brother, was a technical wrestler who was known as the Yellow Rose of Texas. He was considered the best skilled wrestler of all the brothers. Kevin said David was getting pale during the last days of David's life. Late at night, Kevin got a call that David died. To this day, Kevin said that when he gets a phone call, he feels uncomfortable, which I could see why. He said that when David died, it hit him the hardest. But I think with each brother that died, either way, I think it hit him hard, which you'll find out in this episode. David Manning, the Von Erich referee, got a call at 2 a.m. saying that David Von Erich died while he was touring in Japan. He goes to Fritz and says in the episode that Fritz asked which one and tells him that it was David Von Erich. Kevin said that his mom, Doris, ran to the woods after hearing the news, and then Kevin eventually went to the woods himself, wanting to be alone. Fritz looked at the sky and asked David Manning to find out what happened to his son, David, as Manning explained the situation to us in this episode. It was stated in the episode that Bruiser Brody found David Von Erich by the phone dead in a room. Kevin recalled Brody telling him that David Von Erich looked as though he was trying to reach the phone. It was also the first time Kevin saw Bruiser Brody crying, as Brody was a tough guy. After finding out the news, a lot of girls cried as well because it was a huge deal for the state of Texas. Because they were huge and hometown heroes in Texas, the people were hurting for the Von Erich family, as there were 4,000 to 5,000 people who showed up at David's funeral. It was a big deal for the people attending the funeral that they had to put screens and a speaker for the people in the funeral to hear and be included in it as well, as they said goodbye to David Von Erich. There were rumors that David Von Erich died of an overdose, but the autopsy said that he died of an infection as David threw up blood. Kevin said that David died of gastroenteritis. Days after the funeral, Kerry would face Ric Flair for the big title in honor of his brother, David. Lots of people showed up for this match, which was held at a Texas stadium. David Manning said it was an incredible experience as he was the referee for that match. Kerry won the match, and it was a huge accomplishment for the Von Erich family. Lance Von Erich, who was not really a Von Erich, was the replacement for David. Kevin said that he did not like the idea and that he was disgusted by it. He and Kerry were against the idea of Lance joining them, as he did not deliver, and he basically became damaged goods for the Von Erich faith. Mike would eventually take David's place. Kevin said that Mike was a great athlete, but did not have the body like he, Kerry, and David did. Jim Cornette and Dave Meltzer disagree in this episode. Mike was a very skinny guy, so he had a lot of injuries. He ended up getting shoulder surgery and flew back to Texas, but would develop a bad fever. The doctors told Mike that he had toxic shock syndrome. As he was in the hospital, the doctor told the family that Mike's organs were shutting down and that he was dying. The family got a pastor to pray for Mike, and after he was done praying, the doctor came in and Mike's organs were functioning again, leaving Mike out of the woods for now. Mike was eager to go back to wrestling, but some people had doubted him, and he went into a pressured state after getting out of the hospital. The pressure would catch up to Mike as he got arrested for drunk driving, possession of marijuana, and other troublesome things, even to the point where he attacked a parked car. The family attorney who helped Mike get bail was the last person to see Mike alive. Mike ended up missing after getting out of jail and did not attend the wrestling event that he was scheduled for. They found Mike dead 2 days after he was arrested. He died by overdose next to a lake. After Mike's death, Chris, the youngest of the Von Erichs, took over. Chris had health problems, so his body wasn't well physiqued like his older brothers. Having asthma and brittle bones was not easy for Chris, as he was trying to take the place of his deceased brothers. One day, Chris broke his arm and was not able to work out anymore, causing Chris to be angry with himself. Chris got mad one day over a VCR that he wanted to get from Kevin, but Kevin said that he would give it to Chris the next morning. Frustrated, Chris drove around the house and went to a hill, sitting there by himself, as Kevin described that day. Kevin said that he saw Chris crying as he was on the hill alone. Chris told Kevin that if he saw the note that he left behind, but Kevin said that he didn't notice it. Kevin found out that it was a suicide note once he went back to the house. Once Kevin came back to the hill, he saw Chris choking on pills and had shot himself in the head. After Chris died, Kerry gets an offer from WWF and takes it, as WCCW was not doing so great. Days later, Kerry gets into a motorcycle accident where he busted his leg pretty badly. David Manning said that Kerry's ankle looked like it was chewed up by an alligator, so the doctors had to amputate his leg. Kerry lied in an interview from a long time ago that his leg did not get amputated, so he used a fake prosthetic leg to continue wrestling. The Von Erich family kept it a secret for a long time because of all the tragedies that have happened to them over the years. At WWF, Kerry was called the Texas Tornado instead of his real name, and was not able to use his signature, the Iron Claw finisher. While wrestling with a prosthetic leg, Kerry did more drugs and got addicted to them mostly because of the pain he had to endure while wrestling. He got addicted to painkillers, thus causing him to get in trouble with the law, that he eventually went to jail a couple times and got probation. Kevin recalls Kerry telling him that he was going to take his own life. On February 17, 1993, Kerry went to the family ranch, but was supposed to be indicted for drug charges followed by going to jail. Kerry was having a lot of issues, one of them trying to save his marriage and winning over his wife. Kevin told Kerry if they could go to Alaska so that Kerry would not be near any drug dealers and go fishing instead, but they never went. As Kerry was at the family ranch on February 17th, he told his dad that he loved him and hugged him for the last time. Kerry then took off in a Jeep car with one of Fritz's pistols and shot himself in the heart. Fritz ended up finding Kerry first after he saw that one of his pistols was missing. He saw Kerry dead with a peaceful look on his face. In an old clip from this episode that they show, Fritz looked really sad as he was talking about Kerry's death. A couple months ago, before Kerry unalived himself, Fritz and Doris divorced as Doris blamed Fritz for the death of their sons. Kevin stated to Jim Cornette that he used to have 5 brothers and now he is not a brother anymore. Fritz would later develop brain cancer after the divorce and Kerry's death. There was an incident that Kevin explains in this episode where his father pointed a gun at Kevin and thought that Kevin would be next to take his own life. Kevin responded to his father with, "It takes guts to live, not guts to die." He was glad that Fritz died, as Kevin wanted his father to stop suffering. Even after everything that happened to his brothers, Kevin called Fritz a good man. He thought it was ridiculous that people thought the Von Erich family were cursed. Kevin did have thoughts of killing himself, as one day he tried to steal a gun, but an employee stopped him and told Kevin that he loved him. He went back to the gun store and hugged the employee as he returned the gun. As of today, Kevin still lives in Kauai, Hawaii, where he feels at peace. The episode shows us the inside of his house, and in the walls there are a lot of pictures of him and his brothers through the years, especially school pictures of the Von Erich brothers. Kevin is now a father and a grandfather. When the episode aired, Kevin looked at peace when he showed up at his peaceful spot while he was climbing trees. He had to take breaks while being interviewed about his brother's deaths. We also see his sons, Ross and Marshall, practice wrestling as they want to get into the business. David Manning said that Ross and Marshall are really talented as they are starting out their wrestling career. Kevin finally retired on July 17, 2017, as he had wrestled his last match with his sons. Kevin considers a family dinner more satisfying than winning. Interviewers for this episode are Kevin Von Erich, sole survivor, Jim Cornette, David Manning, former referee and wrestling booker, Dave Meltzer, Ross Von Erich, son of Kevin, and Marshall Von Erich, also son of Kevin. I give this episode a 9 out of 10, as it was very deep, but should have been a 2 or 3-parter, as there was still a lot of important information missing. So I decided to look for more information on the Von Erich family that Vice did not cover in this episode. I will put the timestamp on my thoughts of this episode, as this video will be long. I dug online as I wanted to know what other facts the Von Erichs had, especially Doris's last days and what happened to her after she divorced Fritz. This is what I found of the family, and in case you didn't know, their actual last name is Atkinson, not Von Erich, as it is a wrestling family name. The Von Erichs were a strong Christian family and resided in Texas most of the time. Fritz was the patriarch and his real name was Jack Atkinson, which is probably why his firstborn was named Jack Jr. He was trained by Stu Hart, and after retiring wrestling, he was the president of the NWA, National Wrestling Alliance, not the actual rap group, only for a short time, and a long-term president for WCCW. In Japan, Fritz was known as the Iron Claw, Tetsu no Tsume, for Japanese. which is probably why the Von Erich family uses it as their signature move to honor their dad, or for Fritz to honor his time in Japan. Fritz married Doris on June 23, 1950, and together they had 6 boys. He was a 3-time world champion and a 6-time NWA US champion. In 1986, Fritz wrestled his last match with Abdullah the Butcher and won by DQ, disqualification. Before Carrie's death, Fritz and Doris divorced on July 21st, 1992. Interesting fact, Selena Gomez was born the day after the 21st. Another interesting and not so good fact, Fritz won the most disgusting promotional tactic from Wrestling Observer newsletter 4 times from 1985 to 1988. His disgusting tactics were a fake heart attack, using Mike's near-death experience to sell tickets, exploitation of Mike's death, and the exploitation of Gino Hernandez's death. Fritz died from brain and lung cancer in 1997 at the age of 68. He was cremated instead of being buried in the ground at Grove Hill Memorial Park Cemetery in Dallas, Texas, where Carrie's ashes were also interred. Fritz's wife, Doris, liked to be known as Doris Atkinson, but her real name was Doris Juanita Smith. Doris and Fritz were high school sweethearts, but they divorced after years of being married together, and Doris spent her last days living with Kevin and his kids in Hawaii. She died on November 11, 2015 at the age of 82 and was buried in Dallas, Texas with her ex-husband and sons. Doris died from emphysema, a lung disease. Jack Barton Jr. was born on September 21, 1952, and died in Niagara Falls, New York, while the family was traveling around. Jackie died of electrocution, followed by drowning on March 7, 1959, at the age of 6, and was Fritz's firstborn. Fritz's second-born was Kevin, as his real name was Kevin Ross Atkinson. He was born in Belleville, Illinois on May 15, 1957. Kevin gave up football because he had a lot of knee surgeries. Surprisingly, his dream was to be in the NFL, but ended up wrestling after his injury. He spent most of his time wrestling for WCCW and would wrestle barefoot. Kevin held the WCWA World Heavyweight Championship title only once. He married Pamela J. May on August 1, 1980, and together they have 2 daughters and 2 sons, with 13 grandchildren. Kevin and Pamela are still together to this day and run a family investment business. In 2009, Kevin represented and was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame along with his brothers and his dad. He retired on July 17, 2017, but has made wrestling appearances with his 2 sons. Marshall and Ross Von Erich are a tag team and currently wrestle or make appearances in Ring of Honor ROH and All Elite Wrestling AEW. David was born David Allen Atkinson on July 22, 1958, and was the 3rd son of Fritz and Doris. He was named after Doris's brother Eugene David Smith, also known as David, who died of a brain tumor at the age of 14, months before her son David was born. David and his brothers loved to go fishing and hunting with their dad. He loved to ride horses and made a profit selling horses aside from wrestling. David got a scholarship for North Texas State University to play basketball and football, but dropped out to pursue a career in wrestling. David was a huge basketball star in high school. Years later, he won the NWA Heavyweight Championship from Ric Flair, but then lost it to Harley Race. David married a woman named Candy McLeod in June 1978 and had a daughter named Natosha Zoena, but she died of sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, at 13 weeks old. He divorced his wife in July 1979 and married again in June 1982 to Patricia A. Matter. They were together until his death on February 10, 1984, at the age of 25 in Japan. As of today, not much is known of his second wife. David died a couple days after he had won the United National Belt before going to Japan. Some people think that David died of an overdose, but in his autobiography, Ric Flair thinks that Bruiser Brody removed evidence of a drug-related death. The Von Erich family said it was ruptured intestines that came from acute enteritis, which was documented in the U.S. Embassy report. Other than Iron Claw being his finisher, his other finisher was a sleep holder he called Dream Machine. Carrie, who was the biggest star of all the brothers, was born Carrie Jean Atkinson on February 3rd, 1960 at Niagara Falls, New York, the same place where his oldest brother Jack died. He held 40 championships in a variety of wrestling promotions. In high school, Carrie held a discus throw record, and his signature move in WWE was a spinning discus punch. Carrie was supposed to compete in the 1980 Summer Olympics, but he did not go because there was a boycott imposed by U.S. President at the time, Jimmy Carter. He, Kevin, and David had a long feud with the Fabulous Freebirds. After David died, Carrie won the NWA World Heavyweight Championship with a crowd of over 45,000 people in a Texas stadium. Carrie finally beat Ric Flair as he refused to cheat in a previous match with Flair, which could have let Carrie win earlier. Unfortunately for Carrie, he had lost the title back to Flair 18 days later in Japan because he had not shown up in one event while on the tour. Both Carrie and David were also heels at one point, as David was labeled a spoiled rich kid while Carrie was a vain, self-absorbed muscle man. He went to WWF and was called the Texas Tornado, but the announcers acknowledged him as Kerry Von Erich. Carrie won his first match against Buddy Rose in WWF and won the Intercontinental Championship from Mr. Perfect. He lost it back to Mr. Perfect because of Ted DiBiase and had several matches with Ted in order to get payback. At WrestleMania 7, Carrie defeated Dino Bravo, which was his only WrestleMania match that he ever had. Mostly Carrie did a lot of tag team matches and had house shows while in WWF. Carrie left WWF in August 1992 and returned to Texas and won his last title, which was the USWF Texas Heavyweight Championship. He also was in tag team matches with former rival Chris Adams. June 4, 1986, Carrie had a horrible motorcycle accident and was amputated in his right leg. Carrie wore a prosthetic and even showered with his boots still on. In Rowdy Roddy Piper's biography, he said that Carrie had his prosthetic off at a hotel one day and that he and Carrie were really close friends at the time. After getting amputated, Carrie got addicted to painkillers, followed by several other drugs. Carrie had 2 arrests and his marriage was falling apart during his last years. In his autobiography, Bret Hart was told by Carrie of his plans to take his own life as he wanted to join his dead brothers because Carrie thought that they were calling him months before he had died. He married on June 18, 1983 to Catherine Murray and had 2 daughters, Holly Brooke and Lacey Dawn, but they divorced on April 22, 1992. Sadly, Carrie took his life with a gunshot to the heart on February 18, 1993, and the last person to see him alive was his father. Carrie's daughter, Lacey, became a wrestler and was in WWE's developmental territory, Florida Championship Wrestling, as she was also the first third-generation wrestler of the Von Erich family. Lacey made her official WWE debut at WrestleMania 25 because her father and the rest of the Von Erich brothers and her grandfather were also being inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2009. She then went to TNA and won the TNA Knockouts Tag Team Championship titles with Velvet Sky of the Beautiful People. A couple days later, Lacey retired in 2010 and has 3 kids, a daughter, and 2 sons. She runs an advertising company in Southern California. Mike was the 5th brother, and he was born Michael Brett Atkinson on March 2nd, 1964 at Dallas, Texas. He replaced David after his sudden death in order to continue the feud against the Fabulous Freebirds. According to a DVD, Heroes of World Class, Mike wanted to be a cameraman for World Class as he had no interest in wrestling. But Fritz pressured Mike into wrestling. Being an artistic guy as he was, Mike wanted to be a musician, as this was seen in the movie The Iron Claw. Mike got married on February 14, 1985, to Shani Garza and was a born-again Christian. After his diagnosis with toxic shock syndrome, Mike suffered from some brain damage and lost a lot of weight. In 1986, he had head injuries from a car accident which added to the brain damage. Kevin said that Mike had a lot of pressure to be the next David. He attacked a streetlight because of his head injury condition, as stated by Kevin. On April 12, 1987, Mike left a suicide note and went to Louisville Lake, where he died by overdosing on Placidil, which is a sleeping aid, and also had alcohol in his system. His body was found 4 days later, and prior to his death, he had a DUI. Chris was born Chris Barton Atkinson on September 30th, 1969, in Dallas, Texas. He was the youngest and last son of Fritz and Doris. He was really short, as he was 5'5", and he had brittle bones that could break easily. Unfortunately, Chris died on September 12, 1991, at the family farm. Cocaine and Valium were found in his system, as stated in the toxicology reports. Chris was heartbroken when Mike died, and he then shot himself in the head. All the Von Erichs Atkinsons are all buried or interred in Grove Hill Memorial Park in Dallas, Texas, except Kevin and his family, since they are still alive. Fritz and the Von Erich boys were all inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2009, and longtime rival Michael Hayes inducted them, while Kevin accepted the induction on behalf of his family. On December 22, 2023, the movie Iron Claw, based on the lives of the Von Erichs, was released, and Kevin went to one of the movie premieres. Doing this review, it was tough to see how the Von Erich family went through all these years. If I had lost a child, it would be enough for me. Fritz and Doris lost 5 boys. I don't think I could handle losing 5 kids. They may be Christians, but losing 5 kids makes me feel hopeless if I were a parent. I do feel bad for Fritz and Doris a little bit, because I watched this documentary on YouTube called Faded Glory, and Fritz seemed genuine but rough and sad by the looks of it, especially around the eyes. Mostly I felt so bad for Kevin, as he had lost 5 brothers, and he was lucky to have survived for so long. At least he has a bigger family now. I honestly don't know Fritz personally, but in the Iron Claw movie, they made his character into a big jerk, and I blamed him for all his sons' deaths. Except Jack Jr., because that one happened accidentally, and they should have learned from that experience and took care of the other 5 boys. In the video I saw on YouTube, he looked calm and missed his boys so much, as he said that he would love to be a father to his sons again. Even Kevin, who was in a podcast episode for Chris Jericho, said that Fritz's portrayal in the movie was not really Fritz, as the movie is just for entertainment. I also think that the state of Texas is very authoritative when it comes to men. From the looks of it, a lot of people, mostly men in Texas, seem to be gun lovers. From what I've seen, on social media and videos and stuff. But that's just my opinion, as I could be wrong. Also, there's a lot of tough-looking men there, which I think Fritz was a little too tough on the boys. I wish that Doris also would have been more supportive, but Fritz should have at least told his boys that he was proud and loved them every day when he could. Sibling rivalry, or putting siblings against each other, is never a good thing. I myself am the oldest of all my brothers, so had I been in Kevin's position, I would probably be way more unstable if I lost them. I do hope for the best for Kevin and all the Von Erich Atkinsons who are still alive. I remember in the movie, Fritz favored one boy after another, which of course it's always a bad thing for parents to favor one kid over the other, as the other could feel negative and insecure about themselves. I don't think it is a curse either, but a lack of parental love and support for the boys. Like I said a couple of seconds ago, Mike was forced by Fritz to be a wrestler, and had Fritz been more understanding with his decision, I think Mike would still be alive. When I heard of the Von Erich family, I was looking at people who took their lives because I was reading about Kurt Cobain, or I think it was Chris Benoit, and wanted to know why people would do something like that, take their own life. I kept seeing Von Erich on the list, and I was shocked that the name was there. It was shocking and made me think this family should be in the WWE Hall of Fame because they gave their all for wrestling once I read into their biographies, but taking their own life is probably not a good reason to be in there. Then I stumbled on the Vice episode, and I could see why they all should be in the WWE Hall of Fame and why they deserve it. They were heroes in Texas, beloved by so many girls, but seemed to have a family love for one another as they each died. The other just wanted to be with their brothers. I honestly don't think it was a good idea for the 3 brothers to take their own lives, but I think Fritz should have been more supportive and not push them too hard. Such a tragedy, and by looking at the commercials they were in, the Von Erich brothers were handsome and looked really happy to be in each other's presence. It was a lot to learn, but I'm glad to also share some facts that I myself didn't know until I did this video, other than just talking about their deaths. Much love and respect to Kevin, and I hope that things get better for him and his family who are still alive. The Von Erich legacy may be tragic, but it's also great to see how much they accomplished throughout the years, and that they are much more than a tragedy. Their wrestling accomplishments will live on. But that's pretty much it. I will have the sources titled in the description box as soon as possible once this video uploaded. And yeah, it's a lot of information. But thank you guys. If you guys managed to reach to the end, thank you so much. And, put a heart if you reached to the end of this video. But thank you guys for listening, and I will put the suicide hotline in case you guys are having issues or just are kind of traumatized for some sort, in case, because I know this is like something really serious. But thank you guys for your help, and thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself and everyone around you, and I'll do the same too. Bye guys.